what my mission is, my objective here tonight is to, in a very small way, begin to change a conversation. When you go, just before I came here, I had a meeting with the editorial board of the Lubbock Avalanche Journal, and the publisher of the paper there's a guy named Robert, real nice guy, a guy named Doug, who is kind of their lead reporter, Matt, and one of their other reporters. And they were asking really good questions about the future of the state. They're not asking about Republican and Democrat stuff. They're asking about the future of the state. And what I found really, really awesome about their questions was, most of the time when I do a lot of interviews with media people. I get in with a reporter, and I know for a lot of them, what they're looking for is some sort of gotcha that they can write in a headline when they write some story on their website or put it in the paper. Now, why do they try to get a gotcha in a headline? Some people think it's because that the media is inherently liberal biased. I actually don't think that's true. Now, I do think a lot of reporters do tend to have a liberal bent, but I do not think that the media as an industry has a liberal bias. I think what they have a bias to do is make money, which, by the way, most businesses and most industries do. Now, if you're in the media, how do you make money? You buy newspapers. Some people buy newspapers, or they click on something. And when they click on something, you get revenue for ads, right? So if I write a headline that says, Railroad Commissioner Sitton advocates for additional evaluation of water recycle before new regulations are made, how many people would click on that headline? No one. If instead you write the headline, Commissioner Sitton battles against water recycle, how many people click on that headline? A lot more. You can write the exact same story, but if you put that sensational headline on the front, you get a lot more clicks. So we deal in an industry today with the media who are incentivized to write sensational things because that is what sells newspapers and sells clicks. The guys today were not asking those questions. They were asking sincere questions about the future of the state of Texas. And in particular, what led into the discussion was, let's talk about how the future of the state of Texas looks, unlike it may have looked throughout all of history. In other words, what is different about 10 years from today that we could never have said at any time in Texas history before? Right now in the state of Texas, we have more money going into investment in new energy production than it ever has. Now that by itself, though, is not earth-shattering, because there were times in Texas history where it was the most money that had ever been invested in energy. Back in the early 1900s, when after Spindletop, we had a lot of new investment in oil and gas. And then again in the 60s and early 70s, just before the Middle East oil embargo, in fact, even after the Middle East oil embargo, tons of investment in Texas energy production. The difference is, today, Texas is if you have $1 million, $10 million, $100 million to invest in energy, the best bet on return on your investment is invested in Texas, better than anywhere else in the world. Has not ever been that way. There's always been hot investments in Texas, but there was always other places you could also invest. Not now. Texas is #1 place. Texas has more miles of pipeline and more new pipelines going in than any other place on the planet. Texas has more refining capacity than any other country in the world except for China and the rest of the United States. We refine 6 million barrels of crude oil a day right here in Texas. We have more import and export capacity for hydrocarbons than anybody else in the world. And while all of this cool, exciting stuff is going on, two things are going on in the world. One, the world demands more and more energy every year. It has done that for the last 80 years without fail. Every single year, regardless of recessions, economic slowdowns, political fights, wars, every single year, the world has used more energy than it did the year before. And in most places in the world, including other states in the United States, they are trying to shut down their oil and gas business. So think about this. Let's say you were each entrepreneurs, right? And you owned your own business, you owned your own company, and you learned that two things were happening. The demand for your product was going up all around you, and your competition was actively trying to shut itself down. How would you feel about your opportunities? They're pretty damn good, right? Well, that's where the state of Texas sits today. The world says we want more and more energy, and in places like Africa and South America and developing nations in the Middle East and all over the world, people say the easiest energy to use is oil and gas. And Colorado's trying to shut its down. California's trying to shut its down. Places in Europe trying to shut its down. And people want more and more of it, and less people are trying to produce it. I'll tell you, the only other region, nation that's actively trying to expand its hydrocarbon production is the Middle East and Canada. Everywhere else is trying to shut it down. So we're in a growing market with limited supply, and the state of Texas is leading in technology. So what does this mean? If things continue to go this way, 10, 15 years down the road, the state of Texas will be printing money. We will be one of the wealthiest places on planet Earth. Because think about it this, just the average consumer out there, when they buy things, okay? They say, I gotta go buy things. The first thing they gotta pay for is rent, right? Well, food and water, rent, to get a roof over their head, clothes. What's the next thing they pay for? It's energy. They pay the electricity bill, they pay the gasoline bills. That's before anything else, before vacations, before movies, before eating out. I mean, they'll buy food for the house, but before everything else, sports tickets, season tickets to Texas Tech, and before all that, they have to pay for energy. It is the fourth thing in the pecking order of modern day society. The world's growing in its demand, and the state of Texas is leading in its production. So you imagine 10, 15 years from now, man, it's going to be, we're going to be leading the world. So here I am sitting with these reporters from the Avalanche News-Journal, and these guys are saying, well, Ryan, okay, so if you were sitting here talking to a couple of reporters, what advice do you give us? What should we watch for to see if Texas is actually going to capitalize on this opportunity? Robert sat there, the producer, good business guy. In fact, I think he's a pretty conservative guy. Now, we tend to bash media, oh, they're too liberal. But talking to the Congress, I think he's a fairly conservative dude. He says, Ryan, you know, how will we succeed and how will we fail? And I thought that was a really interesting question. I had not had somebody ask that to me before in the media. I said, well, I think if we're sitting here in, say, 15 years, and we're looking back over the last 15, and we say that we did really well, because we're going to get there one way or the other, but there's two ways we get there. One is really painful, right? Painful is we're growing so fast, lots of new people, lots of new jobs, we don't have enough infrastructure. We got 40 kindergartners sitting in a classroom because we don't have enough teachers, we don't have enough schools. Right? We don't have lines at hospitals, and roads are jacked up because traffic's so bad. Like, we don't build the infrastructure to accommodate the growth that's coming in that industry and in the entire state. Like, that'd be a painful way to get there. The good way to get there is we plan for this stuff. We actually build the infrastructure we need. We recognize the number of citizens we have, the number of schools we need, and we invest in it. Now look, on the conservative versus liberal end of the political scale, I'm conservative as it gets, and I believe that in general, limiting government spending is always a good thing. However, when you recognize if the population is going to double in size in a certain period of time, saying that we're just not going to build any more schools is a bad strategy. So we have to figure out how do we balance that, right? So I said to Robert, I sat there and thought, I said, you know, if we're sitting here in 15 years, Robert, and we look back over the past 15, we say we did a good job, what we'll say is, our discussions between business leaders, community leaders, I'm talking about people who serve in county judgeships or municipalities, or people who are leaders in their communities in other ways. Maybe they're leaders of big churches or of big schools. That those people and our elected officials, our governor, our lieutenant governor, our railroad commissioners, that our conversations are not embroiled in the normal political vitriol. We're not sitting here arguing about stuff because I'm Republican and you're Democrat. We're not arguing because I'm conservative and you're liberal. Yes, those are good arguments. Yes, we should have those. But if that's all that we do, then I think we'll have a painful next 15 years. If instead we say is no, we look at the road in front of us and we say this is the big, bold vision that there is for the state of Texas, and we know that private industry, private individuals are going to get most of this done, but there is a role for government. And what we do with that role is we're very efficient at it. And we spend little time bickering. We don't waste money on bureaucracy. We don't waste money on things that don't advance the ball. Instead, we invest the money in ways that do advance the ball. Now, let me compare this to a second to why now I'm here. When you say, well, who are the people that look past short-term agendas, short-term objectives, short-term arguments, and look instead at a long-term vision, a long-term opportunity. Recognize that opportunity and get people united behind that common vision. Typically, those are entrepreneurs. Those are the people that you look around and say, that's how people made $100 million, is they built companies because they united behind a singular vision. So most of what I learned, most of what I use when I'm in those kind of conversations are not things I learned in politics, because frankly, the world of politics is extremely bad at it today. It just is. And that's not just a liberal thing. And it's not just a Republican thing, it's an overall political vitriol thing. We are in a society today where a lot of our voters, a lot of our people are are kind of sunk into their beliefs. They're sunk into their frustrations. They're on Facebook or social media just bashing each other. And instead of listening and having a real conversation, they're getting caught up in all that vitriol. And yet the leaders continue to break out. And guys and girls and men and women are leading companies and doing really unbelievable things in the private sector while government can't get out of its own way. And why is that? Because we are not taking the lessons we learned from private business and bringing them over into government. Interestingly enough, our founding fathers got this perfectly. That's why our founding fathers said we're not going to have a ruling class. They said what we're going to have is we're going to have citizen legislators. The term a career in politics or career politicians, our founding fathers never envisioned that those terms would be used. They thought, here's the way it's going to work. They say, Evan, right? They say, here's what's going to happen. Evan, you've been successful in business. You've been blessed. Your farm is doing well. Your mining operation is doing well. And so what? It's your turn. You have to go and take a couple of years, maybe 4 years. You need to go serve in Congress for a couple of years. But while you're gone, I and Jessica will watch your farm operation for you. And then a couple of years, 4 years, you come back, then Jessica, it's your turn because you've been blessed too. In your legal practice, your medical practice, you've been blessed. So you now have to go take your turn and go spend a couple of years. And you're going to come back. And then after a couple of years, I'll take my turn because I've been blessed and we'll take our turn to do that. And that's the way our founding fathers envisioned it would be done. That those of us who had been blessed with knowledge and experiences from private business, private lives, would take our turn to go serve in elected office. What's happening today, too often, this I'm going to tell on guys like me, we've been really blessed in business. What do we do with it? And you hear about entrepreneurs, guys who were really successful, really had been blessed with money and influence in a successful business. What do you find them do? They do more of it. They make more money. They go on fancy vacations. They buy things. Not often enough for our private business leaders to say, you know what, I'll go step into politics. In fact, when most of them find out, and a lot of them know that I had started some successful companies, they're like, Ryan, you're an idiot. Why would you do this? This is not a good career move, Sitton. I say, you know why? Because that's the way it's supposed to work. Those of us who have been blessed to learn some of these really important lessons in private industry and private lives need now to go take those things, even though it's hard. Even though I spend sometimes days and weeks dealing with the politics, which is slow, bureaucratic. But if we don't do it, who will? And what I want to do today is take a little time to start to change that conversation with those of you who haven't even gotten into the meat of it yet. Now the fact that you're sitting here, because when I was in college, I wouldn't have done this. If I heard there's some railroad commissioner showing up at A&M today, I'm not going to that. It's freaking penny pitcher night at the tap. I'm going over there. Good for you guys for showing up, even if somebody else made you or if you just showed up for the food. At least you showed up. And what I hope to do is talk about what real leadership looks like, the lessons that I learned. How do you all take those into your lives, whatever capacity you want to take them, with the hope that at some point when you get involved, as Jim said, I will hope to get involved in everything political, that when you step into something political, you bring a little extra edge of leadership that is so needed in politics today. So let me start with one thing, and we'll talk about private business, and then we'll take some of those lessons back to politics. And I'm only going to talk for a few more minutes, and I want to get you guys talking, asking questions. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. I started my company Pinnacle, my first company, when I was 31 years old in 2006. A little engineering firm, and I had, believe it or not, in November of 2005, I was working for a company called Burwanger. Burwanger was a mid-sized consulting company, had a little over 200 people, and I had run a division of Burwanger called the Mechanical Integrity Division, which doesn't mean anything to you guys. But what it does mean is that for sections of pipe or heat exchangers or pressure vessels, you want to make sure if you're in the refining or oil and gas business, those things do not leak and they don't break. Because when they do, you have downtime, you have releases, you have potential safety incidents, certainly have business losses. So I had built a career doing that, and I started a company that specialized in that. Started my company out of my garage when I was in the middle of 2006, June of 2006. I took $10,000 out of my personal account, and I put that $10,000 into that first business account, sent my paperwork off to the Secretary of State's office, and I started Pinnacle AIS, was the name of the company, Pinnacle Asset Integrity Services. For the rest of that year, did not take a paycheck. So I'd gotten fired from my job in November of the prior year, did a little bit of independent consulting, left my independent consulting stuff, started my own company, did not take a paycheck for the last half of the year. And my wife was a stay-at-home mom. We had 2 kids, one of whom was just 6 months old. So you've heard of like double income, no kids, dinks. We were two kids, no income. But started that company with $10,000 and never put another dime in. And today, Pinnacle employs nearly 1,000 people, does business all over the world. We do bold things all the time. Now, I'm not there anymore, but I'm still teaching leadership just like I'm doing with you guys, but a little bit more complicated scale to people that work there. We've started companies in leadership development. I'm writing a book right now. We take people up to our leadership retreat in Tennessee, all trying to inspire them to be bigger and bolder leaders. Now, here's the question I have to ask you. With 900 people, how many of them do you think are conservative Republican people? The answer is I don't know, but if you had to guess, what would you guess? Of 900 people that work at Pinnacle, nearly 1,000 actually, how many of them would you guess are good conservative Republicans?
Less than half.
We got a less than half?
Two-thirds.
Two-thirds are good conservative Republicans? The answer is I don't know, but my guess is it's probably less than half because we hire a lot of kids fresh out of college, and statistically those come out of college are not conservative. They don't believe like I do. They, in fact, are always demanding for bigger paychecks. So how on earth do I get them to do things when we don't believe fundamentally in the same political things? Capitalism and leadership. Give me a little more than that. Those are good answers, but how?
You get them to buy into your vision.
I get them to buy into that's it exactly. The fact is, I don't care if they agree with me on everything. They only have to agree with me on the things that we do together. I'll give you an example. We go up to the leadership retreat in Tennessee. The first night at our leadership retreat, I say a prayer. And we get up there, and I know that there are people that don't believe. We may have some Muslims, may have some Hindus in the group, may have some atheists in the group. And we sit down, there's about 30 people up there, all that work for one of the companies that I own, and I say, listen, everybody, before we have dinner tonight, I'm gonna pray. And I say, now listen, first of all, I want to say, look, I know that there are people here who believe something different than I do. I don't demand that you believe the same thing I do, but I do demand that you respect my beliefs just like I respect yours, and I own the place, so we're gonna pray. And everyone kind of laughs like you do, but they're always very nice about it. They bow their heads, and I do say to them, look, you give thanks to whoever you give thanks to. Right? If you have a different God than I do, fantastic. If you don't believe in anything, pray to your ancestors. I don't care, but you give thanks. And they all appreciate that. They appreciate the candor. Once again, it's not required for us to do bold things together in the engineering business or the technology business for them to agree on my spiritual beliefs. But I do demand that we respect each other's beliefs. So just like, and remind me your first name again?
Donna.
Just like Donna said, I have to have a bold, clear vision, one that everybody understands, that is uncompromising. I will tell you, since I'm going to assume most of us in here are Republicans, except for maybe the one. Do you mind if I ask? Are you describe yourself as a Republican? Okay. I was going to say that sometimes that somebody forces you, like, well, I don't really believe this crap, but I showed up anyway. I love it when people do, by the way. We've done a couple of these. We have some Democrats, some liberals show up. I love that. Because at the end of the day, my bold vision for Texas is not one that's terribly different from theirs. At the end of the day, what do we all want? Now, you guys are all, anybody here over the age, Jim, how old are you? 37. Donna, and remind me your first name again? Roger. A few of us in here are over the age of 30. The rest of you are probably not. But if I were to talk to your parents, some of whom are kind of our generation, I ask, let's suppose, for example, anybody in our generation, and I say, what is it you want? They say, well, I want my kids to have a better life than I did. Virtually universal belief in that. Okay. What else would you like? Well, you know what? I'd like to know that that economically we're doing well, that there's plenty of job opportunities, not just for them, but for me. If I'm in my 40s, then I've got another 20 years to work. Well, what else would you like? I'd like to know that, that when it comes to things like new technology, when it comes to things like healthcare, I'd like to know that we're inventing and developing things that are going to improve our way of life as long as we're living and hanging out. Okay, what else would you like? I'd like to know I get to eat really good food. Whenever I have that hankering. Okay, what else would you like? Now that you mentioned it, Ryan, I'd really like my family and I to be able to take nice vacations, go experience cool things around the world. Okay, I just listed off a few things. Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, never vote. Can you imagine anybody that would say something different than the things I just said? It's amazing the things that unite us. Yet we tend to get we embattled so much in the argument between them. What leaders do is they establish this is the bold vision that we're going for together. Now, let's talk about how to get there. And now we can participate in the political debate, but we do it in a way that's not full of vitriol. Let's take one, for example. Let's take healthcare. Today, the argument about healthcare is not the right argument. What are people arguing about when they argue about healthcare? What do you guys think? Free healthcare. So what does it mean when you argue about free healthcare? You're both right, but what does it mean? What's the argument about?
Because
Who's going to pay for it? That's really it. That's the argument, right? Well, you ask this. In that whole thing I just said, no one said I want free health care. Now, you may have some people that say they want free health care. I would submit to you, no one actually wants health care. You're not, Jessica, you're not, yes, why?
Because you want to think that you won't need it.
You want to think you won't need it. What do people want?
To be healthy.
They want to be healthy, right? Now, did you know statistically, providing people more health care does not make them healthier. It actually makes them less healthy. In fact, if I said, what is one thing that we could do? Now, I'm not talking about government here, but if just a group of 20 of us here, if there's one thing we could do to actually make people healthier, what would it be? Exercise.
Lower the cost of healthy food.
Lower the cost of healthy food. And in contrast, what else could I do? Lower the cost of healthy food and raise the cost of unhealthy food. In fact, when I do put on my government hat, I would say, if I really wanted to make people healthier, what I'd do is I'd put a massive tax on sugar and corn syrup. In addition to being a big study of leadership and a big study of energy policy, I'm also a big study of being healthy. Exercise every day religiously, and I watch what I eat. I diet. I do an intermittent fasting diet, and I am convinced that sugar is the single greatest thing that is the downfall of our health. It is. We're all addicted to it. I'm terribly addicted to it. And I try really hard to get off of it. It doesn't take a little bit. Today, we were over at the tech club, and man, on the way out, I'm like, well, I'm just going to have this one brownie. And I ate the whole damn thing. My point is I've read a lot of studies, and more studies are out there showing the negative effects of sugar on our lifespan, on diabetes, on our ability to exercise, on our brain capacity. I mean, it's staggering. And when we look at the number, in fact, something I just read recently, did you know that sugar is the number one fuels cancer cells? So there's now a theory now that one of the number one ways to beat cancer will be to fast. Because when you starve cancer cells, the healthy cells will attack the cancer cells. So there's so many things coming out that tell us about this, but that's not the debate we're having. Instead, we're arguing about who pays for health care. Now, if you ask the average population, how many of you want to be healthier? Literally, how many of us want to be healthier or more fit, right? All of us except for, what was your name again?
Oh, no, actually, I just didn't want to raise my hand.
Okay. Well, usually when I give this speech, I do that. I say, how many of us want to be more fit? I did this one at A&M recently in a college class, 200 of us. How many of us want to be more fit? One dude sitting in the audience doesn't raise his hand, look at me real serious like this. I'm like, hey, man, so all right, all of us in here except for my man sitting here doesn't want to be more fit, and he's just sitting there real serious looking. And anyway, we went the whole talk. He just looked at me real serious the whole time, and towards the end, I said something like, do you mind if I ask you, why is it that you don't want to be more fit? He's like, I just didn't want to be different. Just didn't want to be go with the flow type of guy. I said, so you do want to be more fit? He said, yeah. So you just lied to me. You didn't raise your hand. Well, I didn't think of it that way. Okay, it's fine. Anyway. But yeah, we all want that. So once again, what are the things that unite us? So why aren't we talking about the right stuff? Why is it we're arguing about who pays for health care when that's not what people want? The fact is, because if this half of the room and this half of the room were two political factions, and your supporters were divided 50-50. This half of the room would try to strike fear in their voters by saying those guys are trying to come after your money to pay for their health care. This half of the room would say to your voters, those guys are trying to prevent you from living by keeping you from having health care. You try to strike fear in your voters. Now, as I said, on the political spectrum, I am, if this is really liberal and this is super conservative, I admit I'm probably as far on this end as you can get. But it's not because I believe that I'm right. It's because when I think of how do we do things like make people healthier. At the end of the day, I can't make anybody do that. But if there are costs associated with people being unhealthy, costs that the government may at some point have to bear, then can I tax the activities that make them unhealthy? I'm not a genius on this, but now I'm starting to think that is how conservatives think about things, is if people are going to do things that end up costing the general population things, let's put taxes on those things. And that way, if they make those choices, fine, fantastic. We made those decisions with things like toll roads. You want to drive on a toll road? Great. There's a tax, we call it a toll. There's a tax that you pay when you use the road. It's a use case. So anyway, as leaders, what we try to do is we try to shift the conversation away from the things that differentiate us and shift them toward the things that unite us. Virtually all the things that we can talk, all the political arguments today are all based on the short-term messaging and vitriol as opposed to the long-term objective, which is amazing, which unites us amazingly well. So one last thing I'll talk about, and then we'll get into what you guys want to talk about. Talk about what you guys are going to do when you leave school. I got a lot of ag majors, engineering major, economics, finance majors, physics major, economics major, math major. Who's the math major? When you guys get out of school and you think, well, what is it I'm going to do in my first job? Let me tell you, this is the one piece of advice I would give you where I failed. When I graduated from high school, from college, my first job was with Oxy. And I was doing pretty well at Oxy, and I was a totally self-centered, all about me, the world revolves around me, I'm going to get mine view of the world. However, I was really ambitious. So because I was ambitious, I worked really hard trying to prove myself, and that's fine. It's a fine way to start. I left Oxy after about a year and a half, went to my second job out of college with Marathon. And while I was at Marathon, same type of thing, real ambitious, was doing well, working really hard, worked turnarounds, got to know the plant really well. I was leaving Marathon to go to my third job. And my boss at Marathon was a guy named David Gautreaux. David was a guy, grew up in Louisiana, went to LSU. And he was probably 20 years older than I was, give or take. And what was great about David was one of those leaders who was easy to talk to. He was very cordial. He would joke around with you, but he also demanded performance. He was very clear about his expectations for you, and he wouldn't tolerate low performance. Well, anyway, I decided I was going to resign and go work for the small consulting company. I went in and talked to David, and I'd worked for David in his department. He was not my direct boss. He was a couple guys above me. But because I respected David so much, I took my resignation letter into him. And I was going to this company, Burwanger. And David says to me, says, Ryan, well, this is great. And tell me, why is it you're taking this job? And I started telling him about all the cool things I was going to be doing, the great paycheck I was going to get, how this was such a great opportunity for me, the great things I would be doing. And in the end, I wasn't really trying to show off. I respected David, and I wanted him to think that I was making a good move. David kind of smiles, and he talks, lets me talk for a minute. He says, you know, Ryan, you've got awesome potential to do great things. And if you ever start worrying about other people more than yourself, you might actually do them. That was a little hard to hear. And I'd love to tell you that I heard that message loud and clear then, but I probably didn't. It was probably a few years, probably 2 or 3 years at Burwanger. In fact, when I started the division at Burwanger, the mechanical integrity division, I would run for a couple of years. That's when I really started to realize the power of approaching everything I did, asking the question, who does it serve? Whatever it is I'm doing, who does it serve? And not my boss. Yes, my boss is one of the people I will serve. What about my colleagues? What if I work at a plant and it makes a product? Who receives that product? For example, in the oil and gas business, which I spent most of my career, who do we serve? Do we serve our shareholders? Do we serve the leadership of the company? Because they don't need my service. I submit to you the people that we serve in the oil and gas business are the people for whom gasoline represents a huge percentage of their paycheck. If you're a construction worker in California today, and you drive from the suburbs of California into San Francisco every day to work a construction job, then back home in the evenings, and you make $50,000 a year, at current California gasoline prices, gasoline represents 6, maybe 7% of your annual income. Now, if we could produce a little more gasoline and do it more efficiently and lower the price of gas by $1, we just put $500 a year in that person's pocket. That might be the difference between his family taking a vacation or not. So it's that person that we serve. So what I challenge you with is this. Great leaders, yes, just as Donna said, man, we unite behind a common vision, but that common vision has always got to start with who is it that we serve? How is it that we make a difference in the people around us, if it's our immediate community, our family, our colleagues at work, our supervisor, the people who buy our products? When you ask those questions and you begin to frame up what you're doing in the language of who it serves, you will find a much more profound impact in your job. So I'm going to say this one more time, and then I'll take questions from you, but this is, if I could leave you with one thing, this is it. When I show up at my first job, if you do it like I did, your first 5, 6, 7 years, you'll be worried all about you earning your paycheck, getting more out of work, because you'll kind of see it as a negotiation. This is what I did. The company's going to try to get everything they can out of me, so I need to try to get everything I can out of the company. That was my very arrogant, self-centered view of the world. My hope is you do better than I did. And what you do is you go in and your first job, you say, who do I serve here? And how do I add value to them? How do I help improve their life? How do I help improve who they are as people? How do I help them elevate their game? If you do that, you'll be a better performer, you'll have a better team, and you'll be more successful.